Welcome to Pillow Time Lore, where dreams take shape and stories wrap around you like your favorite blanket. You've made it through the day, and now it's time to slow down, breathe deeply, and drift into a world made just for you. So, fluff up your pillow, snuggle into your coziest spot, and let your eyes get heavier with each word. This is your moment. No to-do lists, no noise, just stillness and a little magic. With each breath in, feel the tension melt from your shoulders. With each breath out, let go of everything that doesn't serve your peace. You're safe here. Tonight's story is soft and soothing, like a warm cup of tea for your thoughts, carefully crafted to calm your busy mind and help you drift gently into sleep. So close your eyes, dear dreamer. Let your imagination wander while I carry you into a land where anything is possible and everything ends in peace. This is Pillow Time Lore. Lena had been living in dorm block B for 3 years. Now, same white walls, same squeaky fan, same predictable morning view of the university lawn, filled with joggers pretending they weren't dying inside. She'd learned to find comfort in that sameness. So when she heard the knock on her door, followed by the announcement from the warden, "You're getting a new roommate this semester," her first reaction was not excitement. It was mild panic. New people meant new habits, new rhythms, and possibly someone who didn't understand that Lena liked silence after 10 p.m., hated loud ringtones, and got very emotional about her cereal brand being eaten without permission. When Maya walked in, dragging a suitcase that looked like it had seen better years, she said almost nothing, just a small nod and a quiet hi. She was dressed in black, wore glasses too big for her face, and moved like someone used to shrinking herself. Lena, who usually filled silence with small talk, just nodded back and went back to typing her assignment. The awkwardness was unbearable that night. They said very little. Maya unpacked in silence, organizing her books in a neat stack. Lena observed her from the corner of her eye, noting how precise she was. Even her chargers were coiled neatly like little obedient snakes. It wasn't until the next morning when Lena, rushing for class, knocked over her own cup of coffee and it splashed all over Maya's neatly folded notes, that the real spark happened. "Oh no, oh my God, I'm so sorry," Lena gasped, grabbing tissues like her life depended on it. Maya looked at the mess, then at Lena. Her lips twitched. "It's fine," she said, voice calm. "You just murdered my to-do list. But honestly, I hated it anyway." Lena blinked. Was that sarcasm? "You hate productivity," Lena teased, still blotting the notes. "We might just be soulmates." Maya let out the tiniest laugh, dry but real. That was the first crack in the ice. Over the next few days, they tiptoed into conversations. Maya didn't talk about why she transferred mid-semester, and Lena didn't ask. Instead, they bonded over shared dislikes, messy group chats, People who chewed loudly, professors who acted like therapy was a weakness. Their conversations were still short, but they had texture now. Maya's sarcasm matched Lena's flair for dramatic storytelling. They weren't close. Not yet, but they had rhythm. One evening, Maya looked up from her laptop and asked, casually, "Do you ever feel like you're just floating through life?" Lena, surprised by the depth, turned to her. Only every single day, Maya gave a quiet nod, as if that answer gave her permission to stay. And just like that, the room didn't feel like just Lena's anymore. It felt like theirs. Lena had barely recovered from the adjustment of a new roommate when another academic curveball landed right in her inbox. "You've been randomly assigned to Group 3 for your term presentation, team members. Lena, Ryan, Zoey," she groaned. Ryan, the guy who once asked if Freud was some influencer. Zoey, the same girl who corrected a professor on his own slide and still looked unsatisfied. Yup, it was going to be a disaster. The first group meeting happened in the university library, 20 minutes late, because Ryan accidentally napped after basketball practice. He strolled in with his signature grin and a caramel latte, completely unfazed. "All right, geniuses," he said, flopping into a chair. "Tell me what I missed and how I can contribute emotionally." Zoe's eyes twitched. "This is a research project, not a therapy group." Lena smiled tightly, mentally preparing to become the glue in this human Jenga tower. The first discussion was civil for about 5 minutes. Zoey had already drafted a 3-page outline with subheadings and references. Ryan looked at it for 2 seconds and said, "Yeah, I feel like this could be cooler. Maybe throw in a meme or something." Zoey blinked. "Did you just say meme while holding a highlighter?" Lena interrupted before bloodshed occurred. "Okay, so maybe we find a balance, solid research, and engagement." Ryan gave her a thumbs up. "See? She gets it. Brainy and chill. Great combo." Zoey muttered something about being surrounded by amateurs and opened her laptop aggressively. What followed over the next 2 weeks was chaos. Their group chat became a mess of memes from Ryan, 17-line messages from Zoey critiquing slide alignment, and Lena trying to translate between their worlds. One night, at 1:30 a.m., Ryan dropped a voice note. "Okay, so listen, I actually read 2 articles. Like read, and I think stress eating in students is a real thing. I'm eating chips right now. This is research." Zoey replied instantly, "You're a menace, but fine. We can add that as a case study." Lena laughed out loud in her bed, not realizing how much she'd started to enjoy their strange synergy. The late-night video calls turned fun. Ryan's room always had chaotic lighting and a mysterious pile of laundry. Zoey presented like she was pitching to NASA, and Lena, she balanced the script, visuals, and somehow their clashing egos. One evening, as they rehearsed their slides over a call, Zoey paused and said, "Okay, don't get used to this, but You both aren't entirely hopeless, Ryan gasped. Are you complimenting us? I said, not hopeless. It's different, Lena grinned. I think that's Zoey speak, for we're doing great. They laughed. For the first time, it didn't feel like a forced partnership. It felt like a real team. And, in the chaos of deadlines, caffeine, and unexpected friendships, Lena realized something. Sometimes the best people in your life aren't the ones you choose, but the ones who end up in your inbox. It started, as most chaotic things did, with Ryan. Ryan was the type of guy who could turn a 5-minute break into a TED Talk on why pineapple belongs on pizza. So when he suggested, out of nowhere, let's take that drama elective next semester just for fun, everyone gave him the look. You want us to take acting 101? Zoey raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. I'm already dramatic enough, thanks, Ryan shrugged, sipping his iced mocha. Come on, think about it. Free credit, no exams, just fake crying and yelling. What's not to love? Lena, slightly curious, looked it up on her phone. It's mostly performance-based. Improv, monologues, group scenes, could be fun. Maya, sitting in her usual corner seat, didn't say anything. She just kept highlighting her textbook, like the idea didn't involve her at all. Fine, Zoey sighed, but if I end up crying on stage, I'm blaming Ryan. Ryan grinned. Deal. The first few classes were easy. Warm-ups, silly games, a few awkward icebreaker skits. Lena surprised herself by enjoying it. Zoey, surprisingly, had a flair for dramatic pauses, and Ryan lived for the stage. Maya, on the other hand, participated like someone forced to attend a team-building retreat. She read lines like shopping lists and avoided eye contact like it owed her money. But then came the monologue assignment. Professor Malik, their gentle but sharp-headed instructor, handed out the brief. This week, she said, you'll each perform a 2-minute monologue. Not from a play, from your life. Something that meant something real. The class went quiet. Lena felt her stomach clench. Zoey immediately reached for her notebook. Ryan looked like he was trying to remember if any childhood trauma was funny enough to be dramatic. And Maya, her pencil stopped moving. The day of the performances arrived. One by one, students went up, some nervous, some surprisingly bold. Zoey's monologue about her childhood spelling bee disaster was fierce and weirdly touching. Ryan performed a hilarious but heartfelt piece about his parents' divorce and how he once tried to fix their marriage by baking them cookies shaped like hearts. Lena shared a piece about failing her first psychology midterm and feeling like a fraud, despite being a top student. Her voice cracked slightly, but the room stayed quiet, listening. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood, slowly, as if rising wasn't just physical, but emotional. I didn't write anything, she said, eyes locked on the far wall. I told myself I wouldn't do this, that I'd skip class today, but here I am. Lena's breath caught. Maya paused, then spoke again. When I was 15, I stopped speaking for 3 months. not because I physically couldn't, but because I didn't know what to say, or who I was saying it to. The room was frozen. No one really noticed. Not my teachers, not even my parents. At first, they thought I was just being moody. She gave a soft, bitter laugh. Turns out, silence can scream louder than words. Her voice didn't waver, but her fingers, clenched into her sleeves, gave her away. I don't tell this to people, not because I'm hiding, but because most people don't know what to do with honesty. They smile awkwardly or change the subject. But today, I figured, what the hell? She looked at the class, at Lena, then Zoey, then, finally, Ryan. I'm not who I used to be, and that's something. She stepped back, sat down, and the room stayed still for a moment longer. Professor Moloch's voice was soft. Thank you, Maya. No one clapped. It wasn't needed. That day, something shifted. The drama class stopped being just a joke. The group stopped being just a group. And Maya, she stopped being the girl in the corner. She became someone they really saw. After Maya's monologue, things shifted subtly. Like the quiet change in air before a storm, she didn't become talkative overnight. But she stopped retreating into herself. She started sitting closer during group hangouts, even rolled her eyes at Ryan's bad jokes instead of pretending she couldn't hear them. The group, Lena, Ryan, Zoey, and Maya, had become an unofficial unit, connected not by similarity, but by a shared sense of trying to figure things out, trying to be understood. That's why, on a Friday afternoon, thick with clouds, none of them hesitated to gather in Lena and Maya's dorm room when the rain began to fall. Feels like the sky's having a breakdown, Ryan said, peering out the window. Zoey rolled her eyes. I'm having one too, but you don't see me crying all over the city. They laughed, then the power cut. The room flickered into darkness. A second later, Maya lit a candle. This just got spooky, she said, her voice low and theatrical. You just broke your sarcasm silence, Lena gasped. I'm evolving, Maya smirked. Ryan flopped onto the beanbag chair. All right, no Wi-Fi, no lights. You know what this calls for. Don't say it, Zoey warned. Truth. Or truth, Lena giggled. The trauma edition. And that's how they ended up in a circle. Candlelight flickering like something out of a coming-of-age movie. Warm drinks in mismatched mugs, wrapped in blankets and each other's accidental intimacy. First round. Zoey, Ryan nudged her. Zoey, what's one thing you pretend not to care about, but totally do? Zoe sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Failure, she said. I joke about it. I act like I'm cool with messing up, but I'm not. I grew up in a house where an ameness meant dinner, silence. I guess I started performing success before I even knew what I wanted. Everyone was quiet for a moment. Then Maya whispered, "That makes sense." Zoey gave a small, real smile. "Thanks." Next, Ryan. Lena grinned. "Truth." Ryan, "Ever almost quit uni?" Ryan leaned back, staring at the candle. Yeah, last semester, I almost dropped out. His voice softened. I didn't tell anyone. I failed 2 courses. My dad said, maybe college isn't for you. And for a week, I believed him. Lena's eyebrows knit. What changed? He looked at her. I realized I didn't hate learning. I hated pretending I didn't care. Maya murmured, "You're deeper than your pizza opinions." Ryan winked. "Don't let it get around." Lena's turn. Zoey, without hesitation, "Who are you outside your grades?" Lena blinked. The question hit harder than she expected. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've always been the smart one, since forever. If I'm not achieving something, I feel like I'm invisible. If I stopped being the reliable student, no one would know what to do with me." Silence. Then Maya reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're more than your transcripts," she said, and for the first time, Lena believed it a little. Final turn. Maya. Ryan grinned. "Maya, one truth you've never said out loud." Maya took a deep breath. "I've never had a group like this," she whispered, "and I don't know how long I'll stay. But right now, this feels like something I'll remember when I'm 80. Zoey exhaled. "Same." Rain tapped the windows like applause. Outside, the world was gray and dripping, but inside, there was warmth, the kind you don't get from heaters or candles, the kind that comes from being seen and still being chosen. The morning after their rainy night bonding session, things felt softer. There was no dramatic shift, no loud announcement of we're best friends. Now just a quiet comfort that hung around them like a favorite sweater. Maya lingered a little. Longer after class, Zoey let herself laugh more easily. Ryan shared his notes without being begged, and Lena felt like they were becoming something she didn't know she'd needed. A strange, mismatched, but deeply grounding kind of family. So when Maya texted her later that week, "On my way to the library, don't let me spiral if I find someone in my favorite spot," Lena just smiled and pocketed her phone. But an hour later, something odd happened. Her phone buzzed. A voice note from Maya. The name popped up, along with a text that followed immediately after. No, please delete that. I sent it by mistake. Don't listen. I beg you." Lena stared at the screen. She hesitated. She shouldn't. She really shouldn't. But her thumb was already hovering over the play button. And then she tapped. Maya's voice was quiet. Barely above a whisper, a trembling, tired kind of tone Lena had never heard from her. "I keep doing this thing where I pretend I'm okay, like I'm some kind of ghost that everyone can talk through, but no one actually sees. I smile, I make jokes, but then I come home and crash. I can't even cry properly anymore. And sometimes I wonder if my life is happening around me. Not to me. I don't want to be a burden, but I also don't want to keep disappearing." There was a pause. "I hate that I'm still scared to let people love me." Then the voice note ended. Lena sat frozen, heart pounding, her thumb trembling over the phone. She'd just broken Maya's trust. And Maya knew it. The confrontation happened. In the hallway outside their dorm room later that evening, Maya's arms were crossed, jaw tight. "You listened, didn't you?" Lena swallowed. "I did." Maya shut her eyes, exhaling through her nose. "I told you not to." "I know," Lena whispered. "And I'm sorry. I messed up. I should have respected your privacy." Maya looked away. "I wasn't ready for anyone to hear that. That wasn't for you." "I know," Lena repeated. "But I'm glad I did. Not because it gave me insight, but because you don't have to carry all that alone anymore." Silence. Then, Maya's voice, fragile. "You're not going to treat me differently now." "No," Lena said firmly. "But I am going to treat you gently. There's a difference." Maya's wall cracked a little. "You're annoyingly decent, you know that." Lena smiled. "Yeah, well, comes with the Student of the Month package." A small laugh, a tear flicked away, and just like that, another layer between them peeled off, not out of pity, but respect. Maya didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. The next morning, she slid a mug of coffee toward Lena and said, "I still get first pick of playlists in the room." Lena grinned. "Fair enough." And things moved on. Not perfectly, but honestly, and for once, that felt enough. It started off like any other Tuesday. Dr. Reinhardt, eccentric, tweet-loving, and dangerously fond of surprise assignments, walked into their afternoon psych seminar, holding a small wooden box. "Today," he said dramatically, "you will write letters to your future selves." A collective groan rippled across the room. Ryan muttered, "Next, he'll have us draw our inner child with crayons." Zoey rolled her eyes so hard, Lena thought she might sprain something. Only Maya was quiet. Dr. Reinhardt placed the box on the desk. "You can write whatever you want. Goals, warnings, promises. Even if you just doodle a cat in the margins, make it honest. We'll seal them and open them at graduation." The idea lingered in their minds longer than expected. That evening, back in their dorm lounge, the group reassembled. Zoey on the beanbag, Ryan on the floor, Lena curled up on the couch, and Maya at the windowsill, her knees hugged to her chest. Zoey was the first to break the silence. "Okay, so, are we actually doing this, or what?" Ryan smirked. "Didn't take you for the sentimental type." Zoey waved a highlighter at him. "I'm always the type who does her homework." Lena chuckled, then pulled out her notebook. "Let's make it fun. We each write one. Tonight, no pressure to share. Unless," Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Unless," Lena smiled. "Unless we decide to," they wrote. Lena's letter was full of questions. Would she still be chasing perfection in 5 years? Would she'll ever know who she was without her grades? Would she still walk into rooms wondering if she was enough? Zoe's handwriting was messier than usual. She wrote about ambition and burnout, about not tying her self-worth to achievement, about wanting someone who loved her for more than her GPA and sarcasm. Ryan scribbled a mix of humor and depth, a reminder to take life less seriously, to not run when things got hard, to to stop measuring his worth by the mistakes he almost made. Maya didn't write. She just sat still, the envelope untouched, when the others left the room to grab snacks. Lena returned a few minutes early and found Maya at the fireplace outside the dorm, holding a folded letter over the flame. The edges were already curling black. "Maya," Lena said gently, approaching. "I wrote it." Maya whispered, "Every word, and now you're burning it." "I had to," she replied. "It was too real, too much." Lena didn't argue. She just sat beside her, watching the paper disappear. Later that night, the others asked if they'd share, and surprisingly, one by one, they did. They laughed at Ryan's dramatic opening. "Dear future me, you better have a dog, a job, and a girlfriend who doesn't ghost you." Zoe's voice softened when she read hers aloud. Her usual sharpness gave way to quiet hope, and Lena almost cried, reading her own. "I don't know who you are yet, but I hope you're kinder to yourself than I've ever been." Maya didn't read one, but she sat through it all, and for the first time, she didn't look like she wanted to disappear. When Zoey handed her a blank envelope, Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe next time." It started with a slide, not a metaphorical one, a literal PowerPoint slide. In their final group presentation, Zoey had stayed up till 3 a.m. perfecting the layout. Ryan, who had finally stopped calling himself the creative director, had added an image he thought was more fun without asking. When Zoey opened the file 10 minutes before class, her jaw clenched. This was supposed to be clean and professional, she hissed. Ryan smirked. "It is clean. And that cat meme is statistically proven to increase audience engagement. Don't fight the data." Lena tried to chuckle, tried to diffuse. "Okay guys, not the time." But Zoey wasn't laughing. "You've coasted through this whole project. Don't act like you're the one saving it now." The air froze. Maya looked up from her laptop, eyebrows furrowed. Even Ryan, ever the clown, fell quiet. "I've done my part," he said finally, defensive. "No," Zoey snapped. "You've talked through your part. There's a difference." The tension exploded in the hallway after class. A full-blown fight, voices raised. Frustration boiling over weeks of pressure, unspoken things, and bruised egos. "You're just mad I don't worship your planner like the others do," Ryan said, sharp. "And you're mad that I expect you to show up like the rest of us?" Zoey fired back. Lena tried to intervene, but her voice was shaky. "Can we not do this now?" But no one was listening, not even Maya, who'd turned away entirely over the next few days. The group fractured like glass. Maya stopped coming to the common room. Lena found her sitting alone under the staircase with her headphones in, pretending not to hear. Ryan buried himself in video games and didn't respond in the group chat. Zoey stopped replying altogether. Lena tried texted reminders, sent memes, suggested movie nights. She even baked cookies, which nobody touched. One night, she snapped, "I'm not your babysitter," she yelled, voice cracking. "I can't keep this thing from falling apart by myself." Maya flinched. Zoey blinked like she'd been slapped, and suddenly there was silence. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no doors slammed, just the slow, painful unraveling of something that once felt like home. Class presentations came and went. They stood on stage together, but not with each other. Eye contact avoided, smiles strained. The professor didn't notice, but Lena felt it in her bones. They weren't a group anymore. They were strangers, wearing familiar clothes, and in that quiet collapse, Lena wondered if all their late nights, candlelit games, and whispered truths had been too fragile to last, or maybe too real. Lena wasn't planning to stay late. She had walked past the auditorium on her way back from the library. Just one last chapter, she told herself, then bed. But the lights inside were still on. At first, she thought it was a professor. Then she saw the figure, small and curled up in the front row. Maya. Lena hesitated at the door. Her first instinct was to turn away. Things were still weird. Everyone was still walking on eggshells. But then she saw Maya wipe her eyes. With the sleeve of her hoodie, Lena stepped in. "I didn't listen to the voice note because I was nosy," she said softly. "I listened because I care." Maya looked up, startled. Her voice was hoarse. "I thought I ruined everything." Lena sat down beside her. "You didn't. We all did." The silence between them was no longer heavy, just honest. "I didn't want to perform that monologue," Maya admitted, staring at the empty stage. "But when I did, I felt seen for the first time. And then we all stopped seeing each other." Lena nodded, her throat tight. "We fell apart. We were good together," Maya whispered. "We are good together," Lena corrected. A long pause, then a familiar voice from the back. "Am I too late for the dramatic reconciliation scene?" Ryan, hair tousled, backpack swinging. He walked in like nothing had happened. Maya blinked, startled. "What are you doing here?" "Couldn't sleep," he shrugged. "Figured I'd crash the sad indie film vibe." Right behind him, Zoey appeared. She looked awkward, holding a laptop and 2 iced coffees. "I brought notes," she mumbled, "and a peace offering." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You brought coffee to a sleep-deprived group presentation crew. You are forgiven." Everyone chuckled just a little. By midnight, they were sitting on stage, scripts in their laps, laughter echoing in the empty auditorium. They went through slides, argued over fonts, restructured points, and even practiced their cue gestures like dorks in a high school play. But this time, the tension wasn't heavy, it was excitement. Even Zoey cracked a smile when Ryan messed up his line and did a dramatic feint onto the floor. Maya giggled, real and unguarded. Lena looked at all of them. Zoey cross-legged on stage, Ryan with his hoodie as a cape, Maya scribbling on sticky notes. Sand felt something settle. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. Together, by 4 a.m., they were exhausted and lying flat on the stage floor, heads side by side like a broken compass. Zoey murmured, "I missed this," Ryan whispered. "Same." Maya said nothing. She just reached out and linked her pinky with Lena's. Lena smiled up at the ceiling. They were back, not the same as before, maybe better. They had barely slept, hair slightly frizzy, eyes bleary, caffeine pulsing in their veins. Lena, Maya, Zoey, and Ryan stood outside the presentation room with their posters, slides, and a fragile thread of hope holding them together. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. This wasn't just a presentation anymore. It was a chance to end right. Ryan kept adjusting his collar like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Zoey had a pen tucked behind each ear. Maya was unusually quiet, but calm, her eyes steady. Lena glanced at all of them, smiled, and whispered, "Let's not aim for perfect. Let's aim for real." The door opened. Their professor, Dr. Shields, waved them in with a curious smile. "Ready, team?" As ready as they'd ever be, the presentation began with chaos as usual. Ryan forgot to unmute his mic when playing a video. Zoey tripped over a cable. Lena's slides went out of order. Maya dropped her cue cards, but somehow none of it mattered because they laughed, and the audience laughed with them. Ryan cracked jokes without derailing. Zoey explained theories with sharp confidence. Lena guided the flow, calm and grounded. Maya, when it was her turn, shared a small, quiet reflection about human connection, quoting a line from her monologue. "People aren't puzzles to be solved. They're pages to be read slowly." There was a pause in the room when she said that. Not the awkward kind, the listening kind. Even Dr. Shields looked up from her notes. As they neared the end, Lena took a small risk. "We thought this would just be another group project," she said. "But we learned more from each other than from any textbook." Zoey nodded. "We argued, messed up, clashed. But we grew," Ryan added with a grin. "Honestly, we still don't fully agree on font sizes." Everyone laughed. Then Maya closed it off. "We just hope this project reminds people that emotions belong in education. Connection belongs in the classroom. And sometimes growth happens between the slides. Silence, then applause. Long, warm, and real." Dr. Shields stood, smiling softly. "That," she said, "was the most emotionally intelligent work I've seen this semester. Thank you for not just presenting, but showing up as yourselves." Lena felt her chest rise with pride. Zoey's eyes sparkled. Ryan did a little victory dance that made even Maya giggle. And Maya, she didn't just smile. She beamed. No guard, no hesitation, a real smile. The group hugged afterward, messy and uncoordinated, but heartfelt. It wasn't just the final curtain of the project. It was the close of a chapter that changed them all. The dorm room was quieter than ever. One suitcase lay zipped, another still gaping open on Lena's bed. Zoey had already left early that morning, promising not to cry and failing. Ryan was downstairs arguing with the taxi driver about luggage weight, and Maya stood by the window, watching the sunlight bleed in across the floor. But the real goodbye was happening here in the space they'd made a home. Lena folded her favorite sweater slowly, every inch of movement feeling heavier than usual. "You sure you'll be okay here for the weekend?" she asked Maya, who had decided to stay back just a few more days, maybe to breathe, maybe to not feel rushed. Lena nodded and gave her a hug. "Check your top drawer when you're feeling brave," she whispered, then picked up her suitcase and walked out. No Zoey pacing with flashcards. No Lena humming while brushing her hair. Just stillness and something warm. She opened the top drawer of her desk. There was a yellow sticky note with Ryan's awful handwriting. "Maya, I never figured you out, and that's probably your power. Don't ever get too predictable. Also, I stole your charger twice. Sorry, not sorry." Maya laughed. Next to it was a small folded paper with neat bullet points. "Zoey, of course. 1. You're the strongest quiet person I've ever met. 2. Keep writing Evan, if it's just for you. 3. If you ever say, I can't do this, taught me that listening is an act of love. Thank you for letting us in. P.S. Don't forget to plant something wherever you go, something that grows." Maya sat down slowly. She didn't cry, she just closed her eyes, held the notes to her chest, and whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." A breeze moved through the half-open window. The posters were gone, the books packed. Something new, I hope, that the bonds they built wouldn't end here, just shift shape. Later that evening, Maya walked out with her bag, took one last look at the room, and smiled. Not the polite kind, the real kind, because this goodbye wasn't the end, it was just, for now, the end.